Sometimes I go on long tangents and I completely forget what I was talking about and why I was saying what I was saying. Um, so I'll try to continue where I left off. Um, so there was when I heard the uncompromising message, it there was anger that arose around how much time I had dedicated around the I am and self inquiry and abiding as awareness and I am awareness. Um, because that was still all concept. It was essentially getting you to the very foundation of the me energy, the very root of the illusion, or the very root of the separation. But it's still part of the story. It's still a concept. It's still an idea. Um, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that it did help the person become more confident and hate itself less and see that it's actually neutral. Like, even though there may be self hatred, it's not true. Even though it feels really real, it helped me to just disidentify or detach from the habit of believing that it was so true. So it was a very helpful technique for the person to disidentify. But there was a lot of seeming dedication and effort and devotion. So, in a way, it was still quite effortful. It was still it was still pointing to a me that actually had free will, but it's not really real. So it was still confirming the sense of me, the sense that I have choice, that I exist, I have a life, I am in charge, I can be devoted, I can heal, I can be present, I can be awareness. Um, and it took me a while to understand because I was so immersed in awareness and believing that all of this was awareness, that I was awareness, that everything was awareness, that we are all one consciousness. It was, again, deep conditioning and a strong belief that this was the truth. And actually, some dogma was there too, that I was right, that I knew the truth. And there was still a sense of genuine love, like, because the belief can produce this feeling like we are one, that we are all separate individuals, but like we are, the essence of who we are is all the same. So there was still love. So the dogma wasn't like as arrogant as, it wasn't that obvious, but there was still a stance, like a position. I'm right. I know the truth. This is the truth. Yeah, so there was still a position. There was still duality. There was still a here and a there, a this and a that. It's a concept. Concepts only exist in duality, only exist when there's two. when there's something opposing another thing, not in a negative way, but what this is just what is. There is no position, there is no stance, there is no truth. It's all unknowing. There is no one here knowing. There is no one here that can do anything. There is no one here that can know this. With the absence of the sense of me, then there is just no knowing, no separation, no stance, no position. And it took me a while. The me doesn't understand it, but it took a while for the me to I don't know, spin his head around it and finally see that it can never get it. Mm. So it's kind of remarkable that the teachings of awareness and self inquiry are actually not saying the same thing at all. It was quite shocking for this character to realize that. And then the anger kind of mellowed out, and it was just like, I really actually appreciate these teachers because they're coming from a genuine place. They believe this, and they deeply feel that this is truth. And they're coming from probably a lineage where, mm, you know, sages have passed down these teachings, and they are really beautiful. It's all I see is beauty in it all. It's all just a play. It's all just what's happening. And all these apparent teachers are, they mean well. I have no doubt that the majority of them really feel as if they are helping and they want to help. It's just that there is no one here, so there's no one to help. That is the very illusion. And it's a difficult thing for the me to grasp that unconditional love is actually seeing suffering and knowing that it's not real, knowing that there isn't anyone really there that's suffering. It can seem cruel. It can seem not compassionate, but But to be honest, like perpetuating the idea that there really is a person and a self there that is suffering and that really has a story and that story is real, it just perpetuates it. And like unconditional love is complete freedom, no matter what it looks like. It's unconditioned. It can look like anything. And that apparent person that is suffering is this unconditional love appearing as that. It is unconditional love. It is freedom appearing bound, appearing separate. So I guess what I want to get at is that believing that I am will never get you to freedom, will never lead to liberation for no one, because resting as the I am is a doing for the illusory person that believes that when I rest as I am, I will be liberated. I am meditating to be liberated, to awaken. There is nothing wrong with any practice, any technique, any therapy, anything. There's nothing wrong with that. I can't emphasize that enough. I think they're beautiful tools. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And absolutely nothing wrong with it. But nothing will lead you to liberation. Because liberation is already this. And it has always been this. And it will always be this. And even that doesn't make sense. It's just this. So, how can you do something to be liberated or to get to this? Because this is already liberation, appearing as the illusion of a separate person that's meditating to get to liberation. Like the mind can't wrap its head around it, it can't make sense of this. Like liberation is already the case. So then, in a real sense, it's like low self esteem doesn't even make sense. Like, I understand that the person can feel that way, but it just seems so. It doesn't really make sense. Because if there's no one there, how can no one be less than or better than? anyone else because there's just no one anywhere. All of that is concept, all of that is story, all of that is I wasn't treated well when I was young and I don't feel worthy enough and I feel less than other people because I feel real. They seem so real. And my ideas and concepts and my story is real. That is complete liberation, appearing as that. It's so ironic talking about this because there's a very distinct memory of how much suffering there was when the person was believed in and everything else that came with that. When all of that was believed in, there was so much suffering. So it feels weird to talk about this when there's also like a conditioned feeling here that like understands. And then there's also some habit here to want to make someone else feel better. But now there's an undeniable recognition by no one that there is no one there. And what's appearing is just appearing. And it's not really real. Perhaps one thing I can say is like, so there was a sense that when I was listening to the uncompromising message, there was intense fear, fear, like an existential crisis kind of fear. And this seemed different. You know, during those 7, 8 months of meditation and healing and feeling the feelings and like that was really intense. And there were moments where I felt like if I feel this, I will fucking die. And this reminded me of that time, but this was existential. This was like the complete death of me. It felt like it was it. Almost like there was no turning back. And it was so devastating. And there was a time where maybe a month or a couple weeks, maybe not even that long, that I turned away from the uncompromising message because it was just so unacceptable for the me. And I just couldn't. It was like, I was going through a couple days of just like existential dread and then an instinct in me was just like, oh, this is really bad. This is unhealthy. This is dangerous. This message is dangerous. And so I turned away from it and kind of continued or tried to continue my old way of like practicing and doing all those things. But then it just like I couldn't really believe it anymore. I couldn't believe awareness. I couldn't believe those concepts anymore. I couldn't believe that there was a me that had choice in doing anything. So there was less and less energy going toward the concepts. Um, and then eventually there was a returning back to this message or this communication, whatever you want to call it. And and it seemed like there was more and more neutrality or like equilibrium. Just like there were more and more glimpses. And then eventually, I can't quite remember, but it seemed like eventually there was just less and less caring. Whether I was awake, there's no one to awaken. But whether it happened or it didn't, there was kind of a sense like it's not up to me because I don't exist. So it either will happen or it won't. It's not in anyone's control because no one exists. And so there was kind of like just continuing on with life. And of course, there were kind of like hopes like, am I awake and no? Did it happen? Um, but that also was less and less believed in, and there was less and less caring of it too. And perhaps there was like a natural acceptance that I can't bring this about. It's in no one's control. Um, yeah, and there was still like subtle suffering. It still felt shitty. Um, like the person just didn't like feeling like a person, but it kind of, went on and off with just like continuing life and like giving it up. And then, um, but there was like an on and off and sometimes really strong magnetic pull to this message and what was being said. And like, it, like a knowing by no one that this is it. So I couldn't help but just coming back, coming back, coming back. Um, and then there was another moment where it was like existential dread. Maybe it wasn't a moment. It was like a couple days, maybe a week, and then like a day where it was just like real existential dread, but not even caring anymore. Like knowing that this feels real shitty. And like the usual thing the me would do was try to make itself feel better, which is completely natural, to like eat more of what it wants or like go for a longer walk or like exercise a bit more or watch some comedy. Um, just trying to make it feel better one way or the other. And there was this deep recognition somewhere, I don't know. It was just there that I don't want to hide anymore. I don't want to be on this hamster wheel anymore. Like there was a true, genuine, like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to be on this limited, tiny hamster wheel that feels as if it's getting somewhere, feels as if it feels better, feels as if it fixed the problem, only to suffer again. I just didn't want to be on that loop anymore. But it was deeper than a wanting. It was like just a recognition here. I don't know where. Um, Probably by just listening to this message that just over it. So there was a day or a couple hours where it was just like I felt nauseous. And I don't think the body has felt that particular way. It felt odd. It felt like a little bit of food poisoning. I knew it wasn't food poisoning, but it was just like turning inside, like so uncomfortable, like nauseating, and felt disorienting because there was nothing to hold on to anymore. No position or stance or like nothing to grab onto. It felt like free fall, and it felt nauseating because for the whole life of the me, it had something to grab onto. It had some meaning, it had some purpose, it had some goal, it had a reason to live, it had a point, it had something to achieve, like some anchor point. But it felt like there was just a natural nothingness. So the body felt really nauseated. And then there was no or very little resistance to like the dizziness and uh, the discomfort. Um, and there was even like pretty distinct and clear thoughts that were reminiscent of when I was super depressed in the past. But the me wasn't really depressed. It was the me had gone to a pretty far extent already that I didn't believe what the mind was saying. So the mind had distinctly said, you should just end it, or you should kill yourself, or I don't want to go on. It said things like that, and it was odd. The body felt nauseated and like um, horrific, and I had to like lie on the bed for a while, just like, and the nausea was there. Very little resistance to it. I can't even say if there was resistance because I don't know. Um, yeah, but there was this noticing of those thoughts like, what? Like a real not believing in it and seeing, like, wow, this is really, the thoughts are really not believable. They're really a bit random, I guess, Because, yeah, the sense of me was like pretty dissolved already, and so those thoughts weren't really sticking to anything. So they didn't have such a gravity. It was just like clearly there. And then it was so clearly seen that, whoa, thoughts really have no substance. And it's only when there's a strong sense of me or a sense of me that identifies with the thoughts, that claims the thoughts and owns the thoughts and say it's my thoughts, that I'm the thinker. But in reality, it's just thoughts. And it's just emotions. It's just thinking, it's just emotioning, it's just feeling for no one. So then after that day when I felt really nauseated, um, I I guess there were like longer glimpses. So like it felt like the me now were the glimpses. There were moments of the me coming up rather than the moments of the no me coming up sparingly. It was more like the me would come up subtly. And again, there was no caring anymore whether liberation happened or not, because the only one that cares is the me. And so the me was dissolving on its own. No one was doing it. The me wasn't doing it. And there was just no caring. There was no recording of it. There was no awareness. I can't even say awareness because I don't know. There was more and more nothing. There was nothing was keeping track anymore. Nothing was like owning it. Nothing was putting things in a timeline. Nothing was grabbing onto experiences and labeling things and making meaning out of things. It was like the caring of whether it happened or not was just less and less there. So I think that I'm missing a lot of things. This is not a linear process. This is not the same for everyone by any stretch. It's like every seeming individual has like a different story of what happened, how it happened. So whatever I said has no meaning. None of this has to happen to anyone else. Like, it's just what happened here. It's just like fun to talk about. It's just a story. I think one, there is kind of no point to the talking, but there's an enjoyment here to talk about this stuff. And there's also a sense of just how much suffering there is. Even till like you can't say the last moment that the me existed. Like you can't pinpoint that. It's just like, you just how do you know that, and who knows that? Um, but anyways, there's just like a lot of suffering when there's the me energy, and it claims and owns everything and identifies and makes meaning out of all the thoughts and the emotions. And so I don't know, there's just a wanting to talk about this. Yeah, and I guess I also just want to say, because it can feel chaotic internally when the me is dissolving, like when there's like an existential feeling of dread and death, which isn't real. It's an illusory death. It can feel very, very real because obviously you believed that you were the me for this long. Of course, it has like a heaviness. It has like a energetic it has a real energetic contraction to it. So it can feel like a real death. And there can be anxiety coming up, there can be panic, there can be an exaggerated, like something's really, really wrong. Um, so I guess hearing other people speak about this kind of stuff can like alleviate the intense and dramatic worry that the mind constantly goes through. Um, because in reality, like if there isn't deep, deep trauma in the system and you're relatively emotionally balanced, then and I that's a condition that I still put on it. So it's not like that is even true. But really the mind is really scared of negative emotions. So it just feels as if it's really gonna die, but it's not true. It's just sensations. Just sensations. Like it was so clear in that moment of nausea and existential dread that without that belief in the mind that was saying you should kill yourself, just end it, without the belief in that, it was literally like turning of the stomach, sensations in the stomach. And it really wasn't that bad. It was the idea that was making it worse. So it's kind of like now when there's pain, it's like not even in the body, it's just a sensation somewhere in space, and it's just a sensation. It sometimes can't even be labeled as pain. Like it can't be defined. It's just what's happening. It doesn't have meaning. And there can still be the thoughts that make a story out of it. It's not really believed in. There's no problem. It's just a sensation. And this narrative is not happening in the head. This is just trying to describe what is. So, hope that was entertaining.